Well, as all of you know, if you've been following along of the build of Victoria and of Arabella, that yesterday on June 17th, if everything went as according to plan, that Arabella was launched. So Victoria should be launched today on June 18th. Now, as many of you may realize, that I've been working way ahead of the videos when they're coming out. So I've already videotaped a lot of other content. Now, one of the things that I like to do on my channel is to build the episodes as chapters. And what I mean by that is that it is of a specific task. Now, the reason I like to do that is then it's very easy to search. So for example, one of the upcoming episodes will be on building the mast, spar, and the oars. Well, if somebody is interested in building oars, then they can find that episode quite easily. So these videos will continue to come out into mid-August. So for now, let's get busy building the seats, putting in the knees, and attaching the gunnels. Well, we're going to get started building the seats for our little tender here. Now, one of the things I often get asked is what are some of my favorite boat building books? Now, you know I run this online boat building clinic that we meet once a week online, and we have a reoccurring theme that comes up in a lot of those sessions, and that is problem solving. So one of my favorite boat building books is not necessarily per se a boat building book, but a book about principles of problem solving. Now, the book is The Right Way, and it's 7 problem-solving principles that were developed by the Wright brothers. Now, it's written as a business book, but problem solving is problem solving. So some of the 7 principles are things like forging, it's the principle of constructive conflict, tackle the tyrant, the principle of worst things first, fiddling, mind warping, relentless preparation, and measure twice. So one of my favorite principles is tackling the tyrant. So I'm going to tackle the tyrant and work on the aft seat first because it's going to be the most complicated. Now, it's complicated in that I need to decide which way it's going to hinge. And also, this is the storage unit that will hold the rudder-tiller combination and the dagger board when they're not in use and when the boat is stored on top of the cabin roof. So that's the first thing I need to figure out is how that tiller rudder is going to fit inside of this aft seat chamber. So you can see how the rudder-tiller combination fits in here. Now I had to elevate it enough so that the hull was wide enough that it would accommodate it, but it's at least an inch below where the seat will be here, and it's quite a bit lower where the back of the seat will lie. So what I did was I put a couple of braces in here that I've marked out with some tape so that I can relocate them. Now, the next issue will be that because there's enough room in here that I need to put the dagger board, make space for it. So I need to figure out some bracing mechanism for that too. Now you can see I've already got these fitted nicely and I've put some varnish on it already. So the next step is to build the dagger board so I can make sure that that fits in there. So the first thing I did was I cut this at an angle and rounded it off, and I sort of arbitrarily guessed what that angle would be. So it was about 12 degrees. So now what I need to do is to figure out that the dagger board can come in here like so, and that it misses this one here. Now, one of the things that I can tell is that over here on that angle, I've got at least, probably an inch here before it touches the hull here. So I could cut this back at a little bit more of an angle, which would gain me another inch. And I think another inch deeper into the water would be better than keeping this angle. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is to mark this angle and then recut it. Okay, so I've got this recut and new radius is put on it. So we'll slide this in here and see. That fits, well, that fits a lot better. So now what I've got here is the length of this is 29 inches long. So if I take my measuring stick here and I put the top of this clamp at 29 and put that in here, and we'll see how much comes out the bottom. So it looks like it comes down 15 inches, which is completely adequate. So now I know that I can cut this off at 29 inches, which is right about here. And we'll see how that fits. I'll see if it slides in here. I've got plenty of room to spare. So now that I know that that fits good, I need to measure the top of the dagger board. 2 1/4. And then this way, I'm going to let it stick over this way about 1/8 of an inch, and on the back about 1/4. The reason for it being not very much here is I don't have a lot of distance. Well, it's very critical distance, I should say, between the center seat and the aft seat, because the hatchway for Arabella needs to fit up in there. So I'm just going to go as tightly as I can at 1/8 and then add 1/4 to the fore side, so that makes it 12 1/4. So again, that was 2 1/4 by 12 1/4. Now that I've got the dagger board all figured out, now I can see how it's going to fit back here in this aft hatch. It fits in there nice. Okay, I think what I'm going to do next then is make another brace. Oops. Make another brace that sits underneath here, across here, and then that should hold that in there securely. So that's what I'm going to do next, is make another piece that'll go right in here. After I got those braces worked out, I then began working on laying out the sides for the aft locker hatch that will also be the aft seat. Well, now that I've got the framework for the aft seat all fitted and dry fitted in here, the next thing I need to do is to make the actual seat. Now this seat's going to be hinged on the back here, so it'll open this way. And it needs to be 36.5 inches by 14 inches. Now the challenge here is that it needs to be 3/4 of an inch thick, and I've used up pretty much all of the 3/4 inch mahogany that I was given by Steve. A lot of it went into the transom, at least the good pieces, and I've had some small pieces that I've been able to mill down. But I do have quite a bit of some of this mahogany that is only 1/2 inch thick. So what I'm going to need to do is to take these boards and cut them, up by 37 inches or so, and then mill them down maybe to like 3/8 of an inch, and then back it with another piece. So I'm going to have to laminate up a seat. So I've got to figure all that out, and that's the next task. Is I've got quite a few, well, I've got a lot of this tongue and grooved 1/2 inch material that was on the ceiling of the original Victoria. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go perpendicular to this. That should give it a lot of strength, and then I can mill this down a little bit on each end and make it 3/8 of an inch, so that I'll end up with 3/4 of an inch. I've got the aft seat all glued up now. I think actually having that grain at opposing angles is going to really make it pretty strong. So while this is setting up overnight, I'm going to start working on the foredeck. I started by making a template. Now this chamber will be completely sealed up so that it can act as a flotation chamber. And before I close up this chamber, I need to install this bronze toe eye that I had cast. After I got the casting cleaned up, I then determined the location for it. I then fiberglassed both sides of the foredeck, and while I was at it, I also fiberglassed the diger board. After curing for several days and a little fairing compound on the diger board, I then put 2 coats of Total Protect epoxy primer on both sides of the diger board and the foredeck. I attached the foredeck using some Fixo epoxy adhesive from Total Boat. So the epoxy is all set up, and one of the things you might have noticed is that this has just a slight camber onto it. So it's a little high here and then slopes down. So I've cut a piece of mahogany and routed the edges that will fit right on here like that, which will match that camber. And then what this will be for is, one, to trim up this foredeck, and then also I'll be able to put the mast partner, will have a place for it to attach like so. So the next thing I'm going to do is to glue this trim piece on just like that. So here at the center seat, of course I've got the centerboard trunk all finished. So what I need to determine now is where these seats are how long they need to be. So one of the things that I'm fortunate to have are some of these grown knees that Steve sent me. So I'm thinking that from in here I want to put a knee as to help support this. So I need to determine how far over that might need to go. So if I go over, say, 7 inches or so, then that would leave me 15 inches in that direction. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is to break the seat at about here. Now what I'll do is have this part of the seat be hinged here so that they'll open up this direction. So I need to locate some material for that. So I have some fairly thick mahogany from Victoria's Cabin Sides. So I thought I'd get started with these little side pieces first. And I found some pieces where it's before the porthole there is 7 inches. So that'll give me a little extra that I can come up into here before I hit those holes. Now I need 12¼ inches, and I've got just barely, just a little over 12. So I may have to laminate a piece on there. but there's definitely enough on this side and on this side to get both sides. So that's what I'm going to do next is I'm going to cut these off and get these processed and scribed to those locations. I've got the center seats all glued up, and you can see I had to add a little bit in order to get the proper width. I'm slowly getting the parts to the seats, center seats done here. So this seat's going to fit right in there like that. Now, one of the things that I needed to figure out was when the centerboard trunk is in here, that when the boat is upside down, even though it will be latched here, it still could come out and open up. So I need to figure out a way that whether the centerboard or the dagger board, I should say, the dagger board is in there or not, that it is locked in there. So what I've come up with, so here's the latch, and you can see these are the same latches I used on the soles. And several people have asked what these are, and they're actually for a French door, an exterior French door. So anyway, this will be inset in there like that. And what I decided is I got some sheet bronze, and I'm going to put some sheet bronze in here like this, and it will be attached to the center board trunk or the dagger board trunk. So when that's in there, then that pin will lock the dagger board in as well as the seat down, because what I'll do is I'll drill a hole through that bronze so that it will capture that pin. So one of the other things I've determined was originally I had thought that these would be 3/4, and you can see this little temporary block that I have in there, so when you don't have the dagger board in, you can complete the seat. Is I really like this 1-inch profile here, so I'm going to keep that. And what I decided to do was, since I already have the dagger board made, I'm going to take some of the offcut of this and put laminate on here a 1/4-inch veneer of the wood grain going the same direction. So I think that actually might look really smart when it looks like the grain goes all the way across the seat in the same way. Well, I've got the center seat all fitted. Now, one of the things is that I have the wood grain growing athwart on the seat, which makes the most sense. Now, what I want to do is to put a hinge here so that these hatches will hinge up and down like this. But hinges and screws do not like to go into the end grain. So what I did was I inserted a piece of wood going the opposite direction or perpendicular to the grain. So that way they will receive those screws properly. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was to use a hidden hinge, and I'd use these hidden hinges back when I was in high school making some furniture. I made a drop leaf desk. So in doing a little research about them, I found out that they were developed by a man named Joseph Soss. So lo and behold, they were developed for the marine industry. So check out this little video.
Back in the year of 1903, Joe Soss was walking on deck at sea when a hinge on a hatch attached to the floor caused him to trip and fall to the floor.
So he designed a hinge in a much better way that, unlike the others, stays out of the way.
So you can see the finished piece here where I've got the mortise all cut in there, and you can see here's where that top grain is about 1/8 of an inch thick on there. So the way these will pop in there is they simply will be pushed into this mortise like so, and then this hinge plank will open up like so. All ready for some varnish. I've got the foredeck all finished now. I've got my piece of trim on here. Now I've painted this with some paint called Total Tread, which has some grit in it. It comes in this sandstone color, which I really like the contrast. One of the things about this enclosed chamber here is that this actually acts as a breast hook, so there really doesn't need to be any other support, because this is really going to be enough support for the front of the boat. However, I do have the original breast hook from the original Victoria, so I thought it might be a nice homage to it to figure out how to at least put it in there so that it would be it would add some structure, but it also would be sort of a nice historic nod to the original Victoria. Now, of course, it's way too massive for this little boat. Now, the next thing that I'm going to work on when in designing this is that I need to put the in whales and out whales in here. So what I'll do is I'll have the in whale die directly into this breast hook. So first of all, what I'm going to do is to sort of get the general shape cut out, and then I'm going to resaw it down so that I only have about 3/4 of an inch of a slice out of there. And then we'll go from there. We'll see how it's going to look. So to get started with the breast hook, I first made a cardboard template so that I would be able to get a general idea of how I needed to cut the breast hook out. So I've got this all cut and fitted. Now while I was doing that, I also cut and fit the knees for the back by the transom there. Both of those needed to be done in addition to this so that I could start planning out the in whales and how they're going to die in to these, to each of the knee and the hook here. So that's what I'm going to do next, is kind of figure that out and then start putting the in whales and the out whales on the boat. I had cut the Black Locust into strips that were 1/2 inch by 3/4 of an inch. Black Locust is a very hard wood, so it's perfect application for this outwale. After I got it dry fitted, I then glued it on using some thickened epoxy that I had thickened with wood flour. Well, I attached the inwale exactly the same way as I did the outwale, with some flour thickened epoxy. And before I did that, I put in these 1/2-inch spacers. They were attached in the same way using the flour thickened epoxy. Now, one of the nice things about these little spacers is that it gives the boat kind of a classic look, in that typically this is where the frame would come up through the inwale and the outwale. So the other thing that's nice about it is that I've made them a little bit wider so that you can get your hand in there and pick it up. You also could lash a cord on there or something if you needed to tie something down. I began cleaning up the gunnels by using my belt sander, and I used an 80 grit belt here. This way I cleaned up all 3 layers of the inwale, the outwale, and the planks. After I finished sanded down to 220 grit, I then gave the gunnels the first taste of some varnish. So the way the seats operate is they open, close. On the back seat here, opens and closes. So that's it for this episode of The Art of Boat Building. Now in the next episode, we will be working on the boom, the spar, and the oars. So, as always, thanks for watching, and remember, if you're going to make it beautiful.